and sat down to eat. They saw a group of Ishmaelites coming down, and then they decided not to kill him. And Judah says, we don't have to kill him. We can sell him to those Ishmaelites, and we can put his coat in blood and kind of come up with a story that way. And what they did not figure is that Midianites came out as well. The Midianites found Joseph in the pit. They lifted him out of the pit, and they sold him to the Ishmaelites, who then took him down into Egypt, and Joseph became a slave from that point on. He was the servant of Potiphar, who was the captain of the guard to Pharaoh. And Joseph was with him, and Joseph served him, because it's always God's command to serve. And Joseph hated his position, but he continued to serve. So you always want to serve God regardless of the conditions. And you don't want to wait to serve God because of the conditions. You always have that as your mainstay. I've got to serve God no matter what. And so Joseph did. And of course, things went bad for him. First, they went well because Potiphar elevated him because he saw the Lord was with Joseph. And the more he elevated Joseph, the more Joseph's work made him richer, until his wife spied on him and wanted to sleep with him. And Joseph avoided her as much as he could, but there was one day she grabbed him and said, sleep with me. And he left his garment and ran out. She lied and said he came in to mock us. And of course, when her husband came home, he was angry and threw Joseph into the prison. The jailer also saw that the Lord was with Joseph, and he elevated him in the prison. He was over all prison programming, and that's what he did. And this is when Pharaoh had thrown in two of his servants, the butler and the baker, because they had offended him. And they were in jail, and they had a dream that night that bothered both of them. So when Joseph is going around and he sees them sad, he asks them, what's the problem? And they say, we both dreamed a dream and we don't know what it means. And Joseph says, dreams belong to God. Tell me what they are. And so the butler told his dream, of course. And Joseph was able to quickly interpret it and say, within 3 days, you're going to go back and get your job back, and you're going to present Pharaoh with the cup like you did before. The baker told his dream, and of course, in 3 days, he said, you're going to be hung. And so that's what he told him. But since he knew that the butler was going back to be restored, he told the butler, remember me and speak to me to Pharaoh. I'm not supposed to be here. I was stolen out of the land of the Hebrews. I'm away from my father's house, and you are my out. And of course, when they were released, the butler forgot all about Joseph, and Joseph remained in prison. 2 years later, God gave Pharaoh the dream, and in this dream, Pharaoh was disturbed and wanted to find out what it meant. And so he gathered all of his magicians and astrologers and sorcerers together, but they couldn't figure it out. And then all of a sudden it came back to the butler that he had forgotten about Joseph. And he told Pharaoh that there was a Hebrew servant in the prison that told us our dreams when you cast us into the jail. And it came to pass, everything he said was true. And that's when Pharaoh said, you got to get him up here. And Joseph was dragged out of the prison. By this time, he's 30 years old. Presuming that all of this transpired when he was 17, it's been all of these years, from 17 to 30, that Joseph has been in this flux situation. And now Pharaoh gives him his dream, which was repeated twice for emphasis. Joseph was able to interpret what that dream was. And that is, there's going to be 7 years of plenty in the land of Egypt. But after that, it's going to be followed by 7 years of severe famine. And the famine is going to be so harsh and so cruel that you're going to forget about all those 7 good years. And this is when Pharaoh followed Joseph's advice, and he realized what he's saying is true. Joseph said, I recommend that you get someone during those 7 good years to store aside all of that extra, because you're going to need every bit you can have for those 7 years of famine just to make it through. And that's when Pharaoh said, who else but you If God gave you all that knowledge, you're the one I want. He took off his ring, gave it to Joseph, and Joseph went from being in jail to the second most powerful person on earth in just a few minutes. That's what happened. Now, he does his job. He's a very good administrator. He's over all the staffing. He's saving aside grain in stores and in all these places in the city and in the country, everywhere, just to be able to survive those 7 years of famine. Then, after 7 years, the famine comes. Joseph should be somewhere around 37, 38 years old when the famine hits. And he left presumably at 17, so it's been 20, 21 years. And he's sitting as the governor in the seat where all people from the Mediterranean world are coming in because they've learned that only Egypt has food. And so the people from all over are coming to Joseph. He's the one in charge of its administration. And so when they come, they bow down to him. And he noticed that among all of those people that were coming, there were his brothers, his 11 brothers that he hadn't seen in over 20 years. They were among them. Now we're in chapter 42, around verse 8. He sees his brothers among them, and he remembered his dreams when he was 17. Because in his dreams when he was 17, that's what it meant. They would bow down to him. Their sheaves would bow down to his sheaf. The stars would bow down to his star. That's what that dream meant. And so he now figures that out as they're coming in. Joseph is unrecognizable to them, but he knows who his brothers are. At this point, he's speaking through an interpreter. He's probably grown a beard. He looks differently. And so he pulls his brothers aside and he takes them in and he accuses them of being spies. You just came down here to spy out the land. What are you planning and plotting? And his brothers are scared. They're saying, we're not spies. We come from one man in the land of Canaan. There were 12 of us. One is not. And he wanted to see if they remembered him. And they're talking. He said, no, you're spies. You're spies. I don't believe you. I tell you what, I'm going to prove you to see if you're not spies. All right? All of you all are going to stay here. One is going to go back to take food. And you're not going to be able to get any more food until your younger brother comes. And then he lets them stew in jail for 3 days. And guess what happens? When they're held aside, they all begin to say to each other, it's because of what we did to our brother. This is why God has brought this back on us. Now, it had been over 20 years. How all of a sudden did they come to that conclusion? Because they knew they had done wrong, but they never reckoned with it. But now that they're caught, they immediately go back to that point. It shows how we oftentimes do wrong, but we're dishonest about it, and we don't bring it up. They went back when Joseph was missing, and they dipped his coat in animal blood, and they brought it to their father Jacob, making their father believe that a wild animal had gored him. And Jacob, when he got that news, it broke him. It hurt him bad. It hurt him so bad that they all tried to get around him and comfort him, but he would not be comforted. It was one of those things that just broke him down, and he was never quite the same since. And I don't think the brothers ever figured that out. I think their disdain for their brother overrode everything else. They never reckoned with the consequences of how this would affect their father, how this would affect them, how this would affect their kids and his grandkids. They were just so motivated to hate their brother that getting rid of him was at the forefront of their minds no matter what. And seeing their father all of those years broken because of what happened to his son, and they having to live there with him, I think was what God was moving on their hearts throughout this scenario. And so, this is what Joseph is doing. He's saying, you're spies. I'm going to leave all of you all here and send one back. Then he came back 3 days later and said, you know what? I changed my mind. I fear God. I'm not going to leave all of you all down here. I'm going to let you all go back home. Get your food, go back home. I'm just going to take one of you and leave him here for collateral. And so they bound Simeon, who was the second oldest son, and he remained down there, and he sent all the others back. And he gave them plenty of food when they went back. But he also put money in their sacks. The money they had brought down to buy the food, they ended up realizing was still in their sacks. There must have been something that was a crazy mistake or something, but they know now they can be accused of stealing the food and not paying for it. And so now the brothers are bewildered by all of this. When they're first in prison, they're saying it's because of what we did to our brother Joseph. That's why God is bringing this stuff on us. Do you know what? Sin does not have an expiration date. It doesn't matter how long you did it. It's still there until it's redeemed. Over 20 years, and all of a sudden they can go right back to that event, which means they knew it all the time. They just never reckon with it. And this is oftentimes what people do. They do wrong, then they live with it as if things are going to go on as normal. But the Bible says your sin shall find you out. It's never over if you haven't reckoned with it. And so now they're going back, they have food, and then they have their money back in their sacks. They don't know what's happening. They go back, they tell their father Jacob that the man spoke roughly to us. He told us we can't come back until we bring our youngest brother Benjamin, who was Joseph's only youngest brother by the same mother. And so now Jacob is saying, you know, all these things are against me. Simeon is now gone because they tied him up. Joseph is gone. I haven't seen him since. And now I got to deal with Benjamin being gone. All these things are against me. But they went on until the food ran out again. And when the food ran out again, this is where Judah starts to come in as a leader. Jacob says, hey, we need more food. You need to go back down to Egypt. Judah gets up and says, Dad, the man told us very plainly, we can't go back down until we bring our younger brother Benjamin down with us. You want food? You give us Benjamin. You don't give us Benjamin, we're not getting any food. And then Jacob is aggravated. Why did you even tell the man you had a brother? Why did you give out this information? He was very agitated. And they said, we had no idea this man would ask us this stuff. We had no idea there was anything. We're just trying to defend ourselves. He accused us of being spies. And so now Jacob's hand is forced. With all of the grief he's had to put up with Joseph, now he has to risk Benjamin, the youngest, which he does not want to do. But he realizes he won't get food unless he does. So ultimately he reconciles, okay. We got to send Benjamin down. But this is what we're going to do. Take the man down a gift. Get the best of the fruits you can find. Take double money back. Take the money back that you found in your sacks plus extra money. It could have been an oversight, but we don't want anything to tick this man off. And God be with him. It's going to have to be God that protects Benjamin. And so they take Benjamin down with them. And so they're coming down. Joseph is warned. He sees them coming in, and he decides that he's going to prepare lunch for them. And so they come in, but they're paranoid. And while they're waiting on Joseph in the room, they're trying to give an excuse for why they had that money, because they think they're in trouble. It's like sitting outside the principal's office. And so they're telling the man he put in charge, hey, we found money in our sacks. We didn't know how it got there, but we brought it back. I just want to make sure you know we brought that money back. And then the man says, don't worry about it. God is in all this. I had your money. And so they don't know what's going on. It's like, what is happening here? Joseph prepares them lunch. When he prepares them lunch, he has the seating arrangement from the oldest to the youngest. And they're wondering how in the world they knew this. So the men go in there and they see the table set and they're bewildered again. How does he know who is who? And so he sits with them. They have their own separate eating because the Egyptians don't eat with the Hebrews. And while they're down there, he's asking about his father. Is your father safe, the one you talked about before? Yeah, he's safe. And then he looked at Joseph. He looked at Benjamin. He says, this the young man, the young one that I told you had to bring down? They said, yes. And he was so moved emotionally at that point, he had to get up from the table and he had to go in some place to cry because he hadn't seen his brothers in over 20 years. That was his baby brother. And he wiped his tears, came out like nothing happened. And they went on their conversation and they ate. And then after they ate, he sent extras back to all the brothers and 5 times as much for the youngest. And so they were getting ready to go back. He ordered his men, give them food again, put the money back in their sacks again, and then I want you to take my silver cup, my governor's cup that I use specially for me, and I want you to put it in the sack of the youngest. And that's what he did. They were leaving town again, and right before they got all the way out, he sent his servant back after them and says, go ahead and accuse them of stealing. He set them up. They're going out. Servants come back. They say, why are you doing evil for good? Hadn't the governor been good to you and everything? And they're like fully exasperated. It's like, what is it now? We've done everything and this stuff keeps coming upon us. And he says, somebody took the governor's cup. And they were so certain they didn't say it. They said, well, whoever you find that cup with, let him die, and we'll all be your slaves. How about that one? And so they had to get off of their animals. They had to take their sacks down, and they all had to empty them to go through them. And guess what? The cup was found in the sack of Benjamin, where it was placed. And now, this brings everything to the forefront. These men don't know what to do. Judah starts to lead the thing. They get back on their animals. They go straight back to the governor's house. And Judah takes the leadership because Judah told his father Jacob this second time, you're going to have to give up Benjamin, but I am going to be surety for him. I am making myself responsible for him. If he doesn't come back, you can blame me forever. He promised his dad that. And so now he is going to the governor and he says, Governor, I know who you are and everything, but you got to let me talk to you. This is where he makes his plea in chapter 44. He begins to go and tell him, listen, from the beginning you asked about our father, our estate. You accused us of being spies. We told you we had a father, old and gray-headed, and he had a son, and one of them is missing, and he hasn't seen him since, and that hurt him. And you demanded that we couldn't get food until we brought his youngest brother down, and he's got to go back. Now, you can take me, but you got to let him go, because he'll bring my father's gray hairs down to the grave. And I'm not going to watch my father die. I'm not going to do that. I'll stay here and be your slave forever. I'll never see my children, wife, or grandchildren. But this kid has got to go back. Of course, he's grown, but he's the youngest. I cannot watch my father go down again. That was Judah's redemption from those early years when they were so hateful against Joseph that they didn't realize how it was going to affect their father. But having lived in that house those 20 years and seeing the effect on their father over that time, Judah has decided, I'm not going to do that again. I'm not going to make that mistake again. Whatever I have to pay, whatever I have to do, he's got to go back. And his speech was so impactful and so moving that Joseph says, clear the room. Everybody else had to get out of the room except for his brothers. And that's when Joseph couldn't hold it back anymore. He revealed that he was their brother Joseph. And man, I wish I had a picture of their faces when he said that. Shock would be an understatement. They couldn't believe it. He had to go to them a second time. He says, I'm your brother Joseph. Remember? The one you sold into Egypt. And then he says, don't be angry and grieve with yourselves, because it's not you that sent me here, but God. God sent me here to preserve life. Now, it didn't mean what they did was not evil. It was very evil. And it caused a lot of unnecessary pain and suffering. But he realized that God used those means to position him into Egypt, because he was hurt too. He never wanted to leave his father's house. He certainly didn't want to see the hatred his brothers had against him. That hurt him. But he had to live with that hurt and still serve God. And then he got to the place where he can look back and realize that it was God's intention to get him into Egypt to eventually be in position to feed his brothers and their families and the whole Mediterranean world. You see, his brothers jumped to the conclusion, because he was his father's favorite and he was getting these dreams from God that seemed to further that same conclusion, that there was no good in it, and they spent their time trying to thwart it. And they never thought that Joseph's elevation would be to serve them in their time of want, in their time of lack, in their time of need. And you know what? Joseph's brothers' attitude towards him is very much identical to the way sinners' attitudes are towards Jesus. They didn't know who he was. They misconstrued his meaning. They think he's coming down as a killjoy, when actually he's saving you. He's feeding you. He's helping you. He's redeeming you. I think about all those lost years and what people go through sometimes, the pain and their hurt, and all of these type of things happen. But the amazing thing is, at the end of the day, God still does good. Now, Jacob's still grieving. Joseph sends his brothers back. There's a commotion of this great big family reunion. Pharaoh wonders what's happening because he can hear the noise. And they tell him that Joseph's family is here. He said, they're here? And then Joseph goes before Pharaoh and says, Pharaoh, I got to go back. I got to go back and get the rest of my family. I got to go back and see my dad. He says, well, if you're going back, you go back in style. You make sure you take the best of the chariots, the best of everything. And that's what happened. Man, Joseph was loaded down when he sent those caravans back. And when his brothers got back, they were so excited, they were like little kids in a candy store. Dad, the governor's Joseph. He's alive. He's not dead. It was their redemption too. And Jacob didn't believe it. He had been hurt too long. He just thought they were playing with him. And they kept pushing at him. He's alive. Look what he brought you. And when Jacob saw those caravans, that old man straightened up and he said, Joseph, my son, is alive. I'm going to go see him before I die. God has a way of redeeming what you cannot see. You go through a lot of clouds, but I think this is a little picture of heaven and things that we endure on earth that are very difficult for us. And then God has a way beyond our way of knowing to redeem us if we come clean. Amen. Let's think about God's redemption this Christmas. That was all what the incarnation is about, to redeem fallen souls. God bless you.